Hi, I'm Beth with American Patchwork and Quilting, and today I'm showing you how to make this cute keeper. This is such a fun project, and it would be so cute as a gift for a teacher or your quilting friends. So I already made one up and used the Storytime collection by American Jane for Moda fabrics. And then today I'll be showing you how to make it using this adorable sewing themed fabric called Make Time by Anila Hoy for Moda fabrics. You'll find the link to the download in the video description. I've cut out all my pieces and now I'm going to prep for quilting the front of the organizer. I'm using spray and bond basting adhesive to adhere the front and the muslin to the batting before quilting. You'll place the front piece on the batting a ½ inch away from the right side and a ½ inch away from the top. So I don't want to move this, I have it in position where I want it. So what I like to do is just pull half of it back, take my adhesive spray, and then you want to hold it about 12 inches away. Just give a light coating and then kind of fold it back. And then I do that on the bottom half then too. And I have a piece of foam core here protecting my work surface. Always a good idea when you're using basting adhesive inside. Once the front is adhered, you can do the same with the muslin on the back. So you're also doing a ½ inch away from two edges. Just make sure they're the same two edges that you used on the front so that muslin is lining up in the same spot on the back as on the front. Nice thing about this adhesive is it is repositionable, so if you find that you got it on a little crooked, you can always peel it off and try again. Now it's time to quilt the front of the organizer. I'm going to do some simple straight line quilting, but this is a great time to practice some free motion designs if you'd like to do that. What I love about this Husqvarna Viking Epic 95Q is that it has an integrated dual feed. So no need for a separate walking foot attachment. It just pulls down from the back of the machine, attaches to the back of the foot, and that's gonna pull all those layers through evenly. So handy to have that built right in. I've quilted my center line and now I'm going to use my quilting guide to get evenly spaced lines throughout the rest of the front of the organizer. So this just attaches onto the foot and then you can adjust it for however far apart you would like your lines to be spaced. So I want to do an inch, so I'm going to line the inch line up with the needle and then line my guide up and then tighten that down. Now I can simply run the guide along the previous line of stitching for perfectly spaced lines. This next step is optional, but I think it adds a really cute detail. So I love the ribbon that comes wrapped around Moda fabric bundles, and I thought using this would be a really cute way to tie in the theme, again, of the sewing theme. So you just take your 2-inch piece, fold it in half, and then you're gonna baste it 3/4 inch up from the left-hand side of the front. My ribbon is basted in place, and now I'm gonna take my back piece and align the left edge of the quilted piece with that back piece, right sides together, and then we'll sew a 1/4 inch seam down this side. I've sewn my 1/4 inch seam and then I've opened this up and pressed it toward the back of the organizer. And then we're gonna use our basting spray again to adhere it to the batting. Now I'll quilt the back of the organizer. This time I'm going to do vertical lines. The exterior of the organizer is quilted and trimmed, and now we'll start working on the interior and pockets. So I have my large pocket piece. I folded it in half with the wrong sides together and pressed it. And then I'm going to open that back up, and then I'm taking my piece of muslin and we're going to spray baste that to the wrong side of one of the sides of the pocket. This just gives it a little more structure, makes it a little more sturdy. And then we'll repeat that with the smaller pocket. Next, you're going to top stitch on the folded edge of the pocket 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Then do that on both of the pockets. Now take your small folded pocket and you're going to measure 3 1/4 inches from the side and 1 3/4 inches down from the top folded edge and make a mark. Do the same thing on the other side, so 3 1/4 in from the side, 1 3/4 from the top, and make a mark, and that is going to be where you're going to sew on your button. Now take your 9 1/2 by 12 inch rectangle and you're going to layer the large pocket and the small pocket with our button sewn on. And so our raw edges are all aligned at the bottom, and then we're going to baste 1/8 of an inch around the sides and the bottom, but not the top, to make our pocket unit. We're sewing through a lot of layers, so here's another great time to use that integrated dual feed, and then you can just baste. To make the organizer easier to fold, we need to top stitch down the center. So I've marked my center line and now I'm going to top stitch. Just don't forget to change your stitch length back to your regular stitch length from your basting stitch. Next, we'll make the flap units. So I've got my flaps and my muslin, and we're going to spray baste the muslin to the top of the flap. Then you'll center that on your flap piece. Next, we'll add our elastic loop. So this is going on the right side of the fabric and the bottom. So if you have a directional print, just make sure you have the elastic on the bottom and the loop is going toward the top. So we'll center that along the bottom and baste 1/8 of an inch away to hold that in place. Next, we'll take the underside of the flap piece and layer that with the flap piece with our elastic on it. So that's right sides together, and the elastic should be on the inside. And then we're using our little flap pattern and layering that and then just tracing the corners. So we're rounding the corners on this flap. Next, I'm going to add a couple pins just to hold this together, and then I will cut along the curved lines. Now we're going to sew the sides and bottom of the flap. We're using a 1/4 inch seam for this. As you come up to the curve, I like to slow down. You want to pivot a lot as you go around the curve to get a nice smooth curve. So you want to stop with the needle down and the presser foot up and just move the fabric just a little bit at a time. Now that I've sewn my flap, we need to reduce the bulk around the corners so that when you turn it right side out, you'll get a nice smooth curve. So you can do that by just clipping some of that bulk out, like just clipping little triangles out around the curve. Just make sure you don't cut into your seam allowance. Turn the flap right side out and press, and then we're going to top stitch along the sides and bottom. Now we're going to take our pocket unit and add our flaps. So we are adding these to the top edge, and it's aligned 1/2 inch away from the center sewn line. And then just adjust as needed. If your elastic doesn't quite line up with your buttons, just adjust until they do. And then we're going to baste these in place 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Now that we've basted the flaps in place, the interior is done. So grab your exterior and we're going to layer these wrong sides together. And just make sure you've got the top lined up with the top of the interior and the bottom. So the bottom is the ribbon side. So that's our top. We've got those lined up, and then we're going to zigzag stitch along the sides and top to kind of hold this together, but leave the bottom open for now. Then we are also going to top stitch the center line together as well. So keep in mind when you're selecting your zigzag stitch, you want something narrow enough that that's going to be hidden when you add your binding. So don't pick a really wide zigzag. And we are going through a lot of layers, so I have activated my integrated dual feed again, and we'll just zigzag again the sides and the top. Remember to keep that bottom open for now. So switching back to the straight stitch, and I'm going to top stitch this center line one more time. Next, we're going to add some interfacing into the pockets on the bottom just to give it a little more structure. So this is extra firm sew-in woven interfacing from Thermoweb. So I've cut that to size, and then we're just going to slide that into the pockets that we've created. So once you have that in both the pockets, then zigzag stitch the bottom closed. All right, I've got that zigzag stitch all completed, and now I'm going to add the loop on the back for closing it. So it's going on the back side. We're going to center it on the back. And then the loop is going towards the interior of the back, and then we'll baste that in place. Now we're ready to bind. So I typically like to sew my binding on by machine on the front and then bring it around and hand stitch it on the back. So just think about which side you want to have the hand stitching on. So I would like the hand stitching to be on the inside of the organizer. So I'm going to machine stitch my binding onto the exterior. I've stitched my binding onto the exterior of the organizer, and now I'm pulling it around to the back, and then I will hand stitch this down. I've finished hand stitching the binding down, and I hand sewed my button to the front, and that acts as my closure. So the organizer is complete. But I wanted to add one more personal touch by adding an AccuQuilt shape to the front. So I'm using this adorable sewing machine from the Go Pincushion die that I think just fits this theme perfectly. So I'm going to give some tips for adhering applique shapes. When I use my AccuQuilt die cutting machine, I love to use heat and bond on the back of the fabric before I cut out any shapes. But you need to decide which product is going to work best for you. So if you want to sew around your shape, you need to get the sewable. This is Heat and Bond Light in the purple package. So this won't gum up your needle as you're sewing around your shape. If you just want to fuse your shape on, you don't want to sew it down, then you need the red package, which is Ultra Hold. So this is designed to be permanent and just for the situation where you're not going to stitch that shape down. So I have a small piece of the fabric that I want to use for my shape, and then my piece of Heat and Bond, and the bumpy side is the adhesive side. I always like to cut this a little bit smaller than the fabric. That way, when I go to adhere this to the back, there's no overlap. I don't have any of the adhesive hanging over. That's where you can kind of gum up your ironing surface. So if you cut them exactly the same size, it's really difficult to line them up perfectly. I just like to make it a little bit smaller. And then you heat up your iron to medium heat, no steam, and then you just press and hold for a couple seconds. and then move it to the next section. So you just do this until the whole piece is adhered to your fabric. So I've got my piece with the adhesive on the back. I'm going to put this face down and just make sure that your adhesive is fully covering your shape. Add your cutting mat, and then I'm just going to crank this through. So we have our cute little sewing machine shape with our adhesive on the back. So I have my shape, and I can just peel off the backing. And then you want to place it adhesive side down on your project. Once that's placed where you would like it, then you can just use your iron again and just press for 8 seconds. And then I also cut out this little heart that I'm going to layer on top. So that's the nice thing about this, is you can layer additional shapes on top. So I just freehand cut this out, and it also has the Ultra Hold adhesive on the back. And just place that where you would like it and hold for 8 seconds again. This detail adds the perfect finishing touch to our organizer. I love this project because it's just as functional as it is cute.